We are now recording. And yeah, thanks for coming, guys. You are the pioneers of the second round of panels here, so you get to experience the new format. We've gotten something like 20 questions so far, so I've selected 5 of those. So no two panels will have the same questions, and this is to compensate for the fact that the last time there was a little bit of an advantage to going later because you had an idea of what the structure was. So hopefully we can mitigate that this time. So 5 questions in total. The first 2 that I'm going to ask are individual. So we're going to have the same format as the last time where you have 2 minutes to respond each. And then we'll go on to the group questions. There's 3 of those. Maybe have like 10 or 12 minutes, something like that for those. So the first question, and we will start with Boarding Co. Last in, first out. This is the question from the community. Time commitment seems important. Echelon has said that the bare minimum is 20 hours, but I believe it should be more. Please advise on how you plan on allocating time to the role and talk about any other jobs or roles that may take time away from your ability to be EP.
Oh, well, this one's rather easy. Isn't part of my introductory stuff that I wrote up for EP candidates. Late in 2021, I stepped away from my academic career to go full-time Web3. And maybe a little too much information. I had to go to the ER the other day, and I spent a lot of that time reading and writing the stuff that you've seen in election discussion recently. So I'll be more than full-time. Should I address other EPs full-time or
No, I think that's fine.
part-time?
Yeah, you don't need to take the whole 2 minutes. It's pretty straightforward. So yeah, let's
Yeah,
go
I'll
to.
be here 60 hours a week probably.
Awesome. Okay, let's go to Aldezo next.
All right. Yeah, I would say the relevant information. I wrote a little text about my commitment in the submission, but I reiterated here. It's pretty similar to Boardinco. As for me, I stopped my full-time job, also an academic one, beginning last year, February, in order to commit full-time to the Web3 space. And in terms of responsibilities or answering to any other entity, I am not tied to any place. And for me, I don't know, full-time, I thought it was funny when it was talked about full-time commitment in conjunction with 20 to 30 hour, because here where I'm from, it's full-time commitment isn't less than 40 hours a week. And so this is what I mean when I say full-time. So I think it is not an issue in terms of not having the time. My commitment is also I'm in the space anyways, 24/7 every day on the weekends and during the week. And being able to channel the time into something that I spend time anyways with, which is parallel in the community and everything that's happening. I think my commitment would be same as Boardinco mentioned, full time, whatever hours are needed. And for me, it's more than 30 hours, I would say.
Hold on. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, my mic's being weird. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's go to J. Crew next.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess there's quite a bit to do at Echelon, and you know, I'm in a unique position where I'm currently working at Paragon's DAO as a full time. A few of the candidates already said full time is a bit of a loose term, the 20-hour requirement. Typically, like a full time role is 40, 50, 60 hours, depending on what you do exactly. I think hours shouldn't entirely be put with such a weight. I think it's what you commit and what you contribute. But prior to even applying to be an EP, I made sure that I checked in with everybody at the DAO to ensure that it was okay with them and it was okay with my flexible workload. I could commit to the role and I could put myself to be in a position where I wasn't just putting in like 5 hours or just attending meetings. Right now I'm in Thailand, and it's about 10 o'clock here, and my wife's in the other room watching Netflix, and I'm here on the call. So I don't think there's any question of commitment. Um, and you can look at how I've participated in the ecosystem thus far to kind of see my commitment to the future role.
Great. Last but not least, let's hear from Gamble.
Yeah. I guess how I would categorize my intention on time commitment would be probably full time plus. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you that I'm already full time in parallel in Echelon. I'm just not an employee. So this is what I'm obsessed with. I spend all day either thinking about it, talking about it, participating in things. It's been like this for the past almost 2 years now. So yeah, no other commitments, and almost nothing else on my mind outside of family and stuff like that.
Awesome. Cool. So I think everybody averaged like 90 or so seconds on that. So for this next question, because it's a little bit more in depth, I'll give everybody up to a max of 2.5 minutes. And we're going to start with Aldezo this time. And I'm going to read the question now. I would assume EPs at times have disagreements, but ultimately present a unified front. Given this context, please share examples from your career of effective leadership, collaboration, teamwork, and communication when dealing with challenging circumstances. 2.5 minutes. Aldezo, go ahead.
All right. So I think the position or my experience in terms of team and collaborating partnership was mainly during my time as an academic researcher at the university, where I had the responsibility. It wasn't purely a research position, but more so a partner position with a company, with one of the major one major chip producer. And what I would do there is basically lead partner projects between the university and this company that were between 1 and 5 man workforces. And in that constellation, I would work with people that were local or international and have a lot of back and forth, a lot of planning, and rather tight time frames in a sense to fulfill the needs or to fulfill the goals of the project. And I would say that this is something that taught me. It wasn't like a lot of hierarchy. It was like very flat hierarchy in that sense. Everyone has his role, and it is like kind of how I would imagine working as an EP in Echelon, where everyone has his skill set or his focus of things. And whenever you need something, you go specifically to this person and try to work effective or efficiently. And this is why I try to learn and incorporate also in my daily type of works. In Web3, I have to admit, so far I'm working mostly on my own and having my own operations, investments, tradings, consulting is what I do mostly. But also, as we are like every time working in a community frame, it's important to stay connected and know who the right people are for what type of questions. And I think that this would be the experience that I bring in that regard.
Great, thank you. 2 minutes and 17 there, so pretty good on time. Next, we're going to go to Boarding Co. Do you need me to repeat the question, or do you have it down?
I'd like to have a prompt again.
Sure. So the question is, I would assume EPs at times have disagreements, but ultimately tend to present a unified front. Given this context, please share examples from your career of effective leadership, collaboration, and communication when dealing with challenging circumstances.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I mean, the thing that first comes to mind, leadership and communication in challenging circumstances, was the start of the pandemic and teaching at a university, and having very sudden changes to the format that everything was going to be. I think one of the most timely things there is that I was going to teach a rather large middle school, elementary school, high school student program on programming, mathematical logic, and math. And I was going to be working with several administrators that are fairly high up in a particular area of my university. And I was going to have several teaching assistants that I was working with, and we had to quickly pivot to redesign the entire program from being in person with lots of people that are rather difficult to keep on task, and with administrators with very particular rules about how you're allowed to engage with very young people. And yeah, I mostly steered that ship along with an administrator, and got all of the people that I was responsible for managing as undergraduate and graduate student teaching assistants to get on board with moving over to a remote Zoom-based experience, and I had years of experience collaborating with other researchers, from early in my career as a student, where I had people more senior to me and having to learn from them, to the flip side, where I was more senior and helping other people understand, communicate to them complex ideas that we might not necessarily agree on, and work together to build a common research paper and write that together, and have some of us go to places to give talks on it as sort of a unified front. And that research environment, I think, especially in the remote capacity that it was done for so long, in different time zones, different places, really reflects what I understand the EP role to be. And I think that will do.
Right on time there. Nicely done. Next, let's go to Gamble. Do you need me to repeat the prompt, or are you good to go?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I think working together and collaboration, and ultimately coming to a unified decision, or yeah, like ultimately being on the same page at the end of the day, despite maybe some disagreements on certain aspects of things, is pretty much exactly what the recruiting process is. So obviously, from my prior experience in that industry, I've had to, starting from the very beginning of the process, meeting with each stakeholder and hiring managers and lead engineers and whatnot, understanding the requirements, understanding kind of each of their individual takes on maybe what this new hire might need, or what kind of background they'd come from. Even there's a lot of different opinions and different color on what everyone wants from this new person, and you get kind of pulled in a lot of different directions. You got to coordinate expectations and make sure that you're converging on a single point of agreement around, okay, like here's what we're going to look for, and then maintaining that calibration throughout the rest of the process. All the interviews, the feedback from different people may lean different directions and have different kind of call outs. So kind of managing on the fly, and kind of instructing the subsequent interview panels, or interviewers to adjust for, or kind of poke on the different areas that need additional exploration throughout the process, is again a very complex exercise in collaboration and leadership and managing all those kind of different things throughout the whole thing. And then at the end, obviously, coming to a final decision, and that's kind of where we circle back to the prompt a little bit, and presenting a united front at the end of the day. Like at the end of the day, we need to either A, hire this person, or B, not hire them. So working through all those discussions, collaborating with the different stakeholders, having kind of that debrief meeting and steering that to decide, like, is this a valuable person to hire for the company, and do they add value going forward. So I think those experiences are extremely.
You're at time.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Go. Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, thank you for that. And now let's hear from J. Crew.
Thanks. So yeah, leadership is kind of a tricky one. I think it's something that you can't just read about in a book. It's not something you can really. I mean, you can learn it from other people, but the only way you can develop that muscle, that skill, is by doing it. I really liked what Gamble touched on, and that's kind of like each team is kind of built up of different personalities, and you really have to understand what everybody's role is on that team, and you have to be able to know how to empower that person. So in my past experience, I did lead an IT team, and we had support staff, we had dev staff, we had our stakeholders, and it was always a juggle. Like, it was always an effort to juggle between the two. The support staff would get upset that we were adding a new feature that they had to support. The dev staff were kind of like, well, they're asking for this and it's never going to work, right? So it was kind of managing everything, and also, trying to deliver the product to the stakeholders, and then maybe not being completely happy with the product that's being delivered, and trying to, help them understand, like, only certain things are possible, right? So it's managing expectations. But I really want to kind of circle back to it being mostly about, taking lead, showing people like what a good example is, and mostly being able to empower your team, and trying to, get them to that goal, and enabling through leadership. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the answers, guys. So now we're going to go into the group question section. We've done this on some of the other panels, and in some panels it was more discussion-like, and in others people tended to just answer one by one. So ultimately it's up to you guys how you want to navigate it. Once I read the prompt, I'm just going to go on mute and stay on mute for 10 to 12 minutes and just let you guys discuss. So, and there's going to be 3 of these, and this is the first one. Do you think term lengths of 1 year are too short to build at the scale Echelon will need? Talk about how you see the issue of continuity and how you might navigate it in future elections.
I think that chimed in on a conversation about this before, when I guess the bulletin was or maybe it wasn't. I thought it was around one of the bulletins, when there was much discussion about the re-election, and perhaps when the wording was such that somebody thought it was technically possible to, guarantee an EP could be in position for 10 years. That there's, lots of government systems in the world, and there's plenty of examples of councils that exist where you tend to have an elect candidate that spends a great deal of time with the current candidate, so that the overlap period between a new cohort and an old cohort could be, 6 months. And that's certainly something that's possible. As for a year, have a much better idea of what that's like in the second year of Echelon as we see the new cohort. But what does everybody else think?
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Canadian standoff. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I
you
think I think a year is good for now. It's difficult to say, right? Like, I think something like 3 years is way too long. You could have a sort of touch point. One of the questions I asked uh, way back, or not way back, maybe a couple of weeks ago, was, is there any sort of like feedback process? So if you have like a good process that kind of gauges people's performance between the EPs and to the community, I think that's kind of a good like band-aid solution to being able to judge whether or not a council is effective. So I would say 1 year is a good length, and it's something that should be revisited if it has to in the future.
Yeah, I tend to agree with both of you guys, and it's hard to tell, especially after 1.2 years or whatever it's been, right? Like, it's that's something that definitely could get revisited in the future, and obviously we saw a little bit of a hint towards what the first class of EPs thinks about that with the carryover, right? The 4 people carrying over. I think that solves for continuity a good amount. And then aborting, I like that idea about potentially having some sort of carryover, or even some sort of system where there's a grant in place to pay former EPs who don't win re-election. Maybe there could be some sort of a grant process to have them be stay on in a consulting basis for a year or something like that. I think that would give the community an option to maybe elect new voting EPs, but also have some people with the knowledge of the what's been done the year prior to carry over a little bit and contribute, but not in a voting capacity. Maybe something like that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's a little different than the elect form where you have two kind of concurrent and one junior that's just learning, but they actually take on the full responsibilities. Yeah. Aldeza, did you want to speak up? I saw a question in chat.
Oh, to another question in chat, or what? Let me just
sort of,
I just go ahead with my
say
point
your
to that
piece.
question, and then maybe we can include what the community wants to ask. It's not much. I can basically echo most of what have been said. I think we all know that time in Web3 is different than time outside of Web3. We operate in super high velocity, and every week feels like a year. So I think 1 year of time is a good amount of time. And I also agree that people that have been, because I said this last panel and this time again, we are in a very unprecedented space and setup where we don't necessarily have a reference how these things tend to work out. So we have to learn by doing it and see what comes around every year, what are the positive things and the negative things for everything, and really try to capture the feedback, not see it as something, oh, we failed in that goal, but rather than this is something that came up as a challenge that we had our trouble with, and next term we might improve in that regard, because we are iteratively building this thing we call Echelon as a kind of decentralized but somewhat steered by some EPs entity. And I like the idea of having old EPs there as, in the university, you have the concept of alumni, of people finishing their studies, but still supporting and helping new students. And I think we can do the same with the EPs, where old EPs basically, I think Jake Fu went out of the call there. Yeah. Where you can basically access the experience of all DPs who can exactly tell you what their experiences was and how they started off, and they can give you kind of an easier start, and like you can start with more velocity into being an efficient EP basically. And yeah, I think we can focus what in terms of longevity, or what we could do is like really capture the feedback of every EP of every year, and then pass that knowledge on to the candidates of the next term in order to make things better. the next time. But I would agree to most of the other things that have been said here.
Yeah, that's a really neat idea. I think if somebody is as engaged in the ecosystem, if you take Kalos for example, right? He's not running for this term, but obviously he's very involved with Parallel. Like I would assume that he would always be kind of available in that advisor capacity, right? So, I mean, we can assume he will be available as an advisor, but for somebody who is more, maybe for example, brought on like as a technical um, lead or technical advisor, having some sort of incentive for them to come back and further advise while not being an EP does sound like an interesting idea. So that's quite a cool idea. Yeah.
Are we all comfortable with a year? I mean, I think it's, it's a couple of us said it's difficult to say from the outside without having to like run a project as an EP, but like maybe
Yeah.
18
I mean, so
months
much
would
happens
make
in
more
1 year. Yeah.
sense. Yeah, in crypto, it's very fast, but also like the things that you're trying to do as an EP, right? You're trying to do more traditional contract work, securing contractors to execute some kind of vision that you have, and like a lot of that stuff just works in normal time.
I think too. I don't know how we're doing on time, but um, I think that also with some more transparency around what each P is executing on and what they've delivered over the course of the year, I think the rate of reelection will get better. Not that, well, I guess we'll see what happens this year, but right, like there was a good amount of transparency around it, especially towards the end of the year with the ratings and whatnot. But I think that over the course of the year, there should be a little bit more visibility because I think that some of the EPs who were more active in Discord before they got elected last year, and then they've been busy for the past year and kind of haven't been, a lot of new members of the community and a lot of new voters don't even necessarily know them, like the people who were there a year before knew them. And so I think with a lot more visibility to what they're working on a maybe a monthly basis or something like that, that'll improve to some percentage of carryover of like a 1 year term is a 1 year term, but that doesn't mean you can't get reelected. So if we're showing like, oh wow, like these people are knocking out of the park, maybe all 9 EPs get reelected. So it depends on that too.
The voter base is going to change dramatically as the token's tradable. Like the Prime is not just the token, right? It's government's token. So there's going to be a time when 10,000 degens or something maybe come and buy the token, right? And our number of token holders is conceivably going to go up by a lot, and then that holder base is going to need to be informed. And like, are they going to have, what kind of attention span are they going to have relative to term lengths and elections?
Man, people are super bearish on governance right now, apparently.
No, definitely. I think also it helps to, this is also a topic that has been talked about a lot, increase transparency and what is happening as much as possible, of course, behind the ranks, and inform people on what's happening, and also on how much time things take and what effort is necessary to reach certain goals. And I think this will make for much more understanding. Also for me, to be honest, I think it's difficult to answer this question as someone who has never been EP, because I don't know how exactly things work behind the scenes. So this is basically an answer of my assumptions, and I think most candidates are in the same position. But yeah, and maybe we can, if possible, we can have some flexibility with the time to account for what Boarding Co said. If things take longer than a year in terms of contract and partners, especially now this term, where this will be an important topic to get some more outside attention and partnerships, then maybe you can talk about something like a position that is tied to a certain role or contract or effort that takes longer than this year. Then maybe you can talk about extending the term for these specific persons who are responsible. I don't know. I think the more flexible we present ourselves in that regard, the better it will be going forward.
Cool. I'm gonna cut off this question here. That was 11 minutes. Thank you. This next question, once again, group format. I'll go on mute, and maybe I'll give you guys that same 2 to 4 minute reminder again this time, just so you know how you're doing on time. And the prompt is the following: how can Echelon present its value to the DeFi community right now, independent of Parallel?
No more context on that, just DeFi community.
I'd say just run and gun with it. I mean, like, interpret it however you like. Yeah, that was the community. Sure. How can Echelon present its value to the DeFi community, independent of Parallel?
Well, number one, governance, right? I guess that's something that's outside of utility within Parallel.
I mean, my main confusion about this question is our token is really not supposed to serve any sort of finance purposes. I mean, it is an ERC20 token, so it can be put into any contract that interacts with ERC20s. And so there's the whole world of DeFi and things that come up with lending and sorts of things. I mean, you see in chat right now, there are individuals who are, you want this individual, independent of Parallel. So I mean, that makes it kind of tricky. But people are selling prime keys for prime. They're basically doing payday loans, which is a sort of finance.
So let me actually just rephrase it in a little bit of a different way, which is how can we provide utility to prime outside of just gaming? Because obviously gaming is going to be the bread and butter, and that's true with Parallel. And hopefully that's going to be true with other games. But for example, something like Inbox, which is still in its infancy, but it could be something that the EP's dedicated focus towards. That's an application that exists sort of tangentially to gaming, but it's not a game. And there are ways to integrate Prime with that. So I guess, yeah, just thinking about ways that Prime could have utility that's not in games.
Yeah, I think Inbox is like the only currently existing example of that, but I think the plan is, at least the last that I knew of, was to continue to build out like additional tooling for the ecosystem. Now, a lot of it probably is going to be focused on Parallel and Web3 gaming specifically, I'd imagine, at least in the near future. But things like a marketplace or things that may serve the Echelon ecosystem, but have a broader scope than just Parallel. I can't imagine too much is worthwhile spending time on, especially early on. That's not going to be that's going to be useful outside the Echelon ecosystem. So like maybe outside of Parallel but inclusive of like the other games that get built or onboarded. But I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has a take on I can't think of a specific example of something that you build for broader, like a broader audience than Echelon. I don't know.
It's hard to. It's such an open-ended question, right? Like outside of gaming, I mean, the only thing that for me that comes to mind is a token has been launched. There's so many thousands of unique holders. Like we have such a large community. Like we can use the weights that we have of Echelon to build a product, right? And we have sort of that I wouldn't, not first movers advantage, but like we have weight in the NFT DeFi sort of community, right? So we can, if a product is made, it most likely will be successful just based on like how many users we bring. So I guess we can bring the users, we can bring the community. If Inbox launched, you would have like a guaranteed amount of users already. So really any product, I wouldn't deviate too much from gaming, because obviously we want to synergize with Parallel and other games and building on that infrastructure. So I would kind of still stay in that lane without going too far. I mean, you can get into like lending and and borrowing, like Boarding was saying, like the prime key payday loans, like it's difficult to answer. So kudos to the community with that question.
Yeah, I would also say very creative one. The problem I see is you can't really, I mean, like the other side, you can't really detach it from parallel because we were born from parallel basically. And also, especially trying to capture, I can see the intention behind it because it's basically also a question about capturing liquidity of people from other niches in our space, namely DeFi space in that regard. And while something like Inbox could be another use case for Prime, the main driver will be what it will do in game. But something I can think of, because when I think of DeFi, and this is a discussion that was ongoing in the past year, was always this separation between active users that play the game and use the Prime in game, and then the more passive quote unquote users or investors or collectors, whatever you want to call them, that were kind of just holding assets or holding the token, or like people that hold or are incentive to buy Catalyst Drive or Prime Drive, for example, are more like on the passive side. And I think the DeFi people are more on this passive yield earning side of the community. And I want to bring up something that have been discussed not that heavily, not heavily enough. I think Boarding also will agree with this, but there were talks about something like, and this is very popular in the DeFi community, liquidity providing and incentives for liquidity providing. And I think this is something worth re-evaluating or talking about going into the next term, is to how do you incentivize people to do liquidity provision, or do you do incentives, or do you just let them do their own things? Is it something that we still should follow or not? And I think this discussion goes directly into this DeFi niche where people say, okay, I can buy the token, provide liquidity, and earn my fees and maybe get some incentives. I think this fits this niche perfectly. And this is also a use case, basically. This is a use case where you say, okay, I want this token in order to provide liquidity to that community. And then, of course, everything that you can make up as utility, as Inbox or other things, detach of parallel. This is basically a bonus to that.
Yeah, one note on that, and again, I don't expect Cold or any EPs to weigh in on this, but I wonder if there is some way to still provide to still offer rewards on for LPing, because I don't know if the vote that we took recently for unlock was a strong enough mandate in terms of, you know, specifically laying out language that we wanted to, as a community, that we wanted to offer LP incentives. And so maybe upon legal review or whatever happened internally that changed from that, you know, that vote to when we unlocked without any incentives. I wonder if there was a separate proposal submitted that specifically called for from the community again, right? Like, because that's where a lot of the issues is that the EPs can't do anything unilaterally, and so because that opens them up to, you know, specific legal or regulatory issues. And so I wonder, again, not expecting an answer, but just saying it out loud, maybe if that's something that we want and that we're seeing maybe now that we need, considering the liquidity is pretty thin. If we put that vote forward, I wonder if that's something that could happen. Just thinking out loud about that. And then one more thing real quickly. I guess one other thing that I thought of that might appeal to like the DeFi crowd. I think that's the essence of the question, is essentially how are we going to pull in people from DeFi, like outside of just our little bubble and Web3 gaming and parallel. I wonder if bonds is something that they'd be interested in, right? As I don't know who just said it. Someone had mentioned the DeFi people are kind of very focused on the, you know, the passive income aspect of things, and so I wonder if the bonds and the ability to lend out cards and kind of earn that passive, it may not be, well, you know, I guess income and prime and whatnot, but also spawning cards and selling those cards and stuff like that. That might be something, those mechanics function very similarly to a lot of the DeFi, farming and staking kind of like how all those things are laid out and how they function. That's essentially what a bond is. You're like kind of putting liquidity into a pool and then using that pool to generate more, to generate yield. Something to think about.
So I thought about this a lot prior to the vote to unlock. I've raised questions about this sort of thing in November. If the thrust of the question is really about liquidity and not so much about capturing the attention or the value flows of DeFi participants, DeFi whales, which is something I think we don't want, because the DeFi community, if we can call them that, are rather extractive. Many of the individuals that have a great deal of wealth from DeFi got that wealth from predatory yield farming and really kind of cratering protocols that existed by providing incentives to get liquidity into their tokens protocol so that they could actually function, because you need liquidity to function in a lot of these financial these DeFi protocol schemes. We don't really need that. I mean, some people have lamented the way that we launched and the lack of liquidity depth that we have, and that does present certain problems for a utility token. But the kind of people that we want to provide liquidity should be individuals who are not trying to extract prime tokens. I think an incentive scheme where you just want to buy the token and then there's a service of providing liquidity where you're going to print prime from staking it to give us the service of liquidity depth. It is not really a sophisticated way to go about incentivizing liquidity. And what J. Crew was starting to say about a product, I have like 30 seconds before our time is up. And I can't really get into it, but one product that I think is very appealing that Echelon could offer is a discount program. And I have consulted with a lawyer about this. Selling an NFT that functions as a discount or a rebate program is in no way a security. There's a great deal of case law and statutory law about what discount programs and rebate programs are, and they're not securities. So selling an NFT that would do something like give you cheaper access to season pass, and then a bunch of rules stipulated by a governance vote and a third-party contract with a third-party contract manager that
We
would
are at
manage
time.
that liquidity. Yeah.
We are at time, but yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you. Really enjoyed that. Appreciate it. And now we're on to the final question here. So another 10 to 12 minutes. If people do have any other questions in the audience and you would just want to ask in chat, do so now, and then maybe we can take another 5 minutes or so after this group discussion for one question in the chat here. Without further ado, this is a little bit of a doomer question, but let's see how you roll with it. So talk about what it would take for Echelon to fail. What actions or lack of actions could cause this? And then maybe to reduce the doomerism, I'll just add, what could you maybe do to mitigate that as well? So 10 to 12 minutes starting now.
I'll go first. I think that Echelon specifically, I would consider a failure if Parallel is the only good game. So Parallel can be a massive success. It could be, Star Wars 2. It could be huge. And if Echelon doesn't onboard or cultivate or develop any other successful franchises, I think that would be a massive failure, because then, obviously it kind of exists to serve Parallel, and it serves its function from that capacity. But I think that almost every person, down to the person, would agree that if we don't expand on that and use, like J. Crew was talking about, the synergy between the community that we have built around Parallel, to leverage that to kind of expand Echelon into a broader organization, I think that would be quite disappointing and a failure on all of our parts to deliver on any of this.
I love that. That that was a great response. I would rephrase it slightly. I would say that um, if we assume Parallel is going to be a knock out of the park, I think Echelon would be considered a failure if it didn't lend that infrastructure that it built and the knowledge that it developed over the time to other games, and most importantly, developing like the entirety of the GameFi ecosystem. So if it kind of just stagnated with just Parallel Studios and didn't expand and didn't lend that kind of, like these EP panels are just one aspect of it, right? Not being able to provide that sort of support and structure to other games to make the whole space succeed. Because I think there's definitely like a big divider between Web 2 and Web 3. And it's like, this was in the previous panels. It's like, how do we bridge that gap, right? And that to me is kind of one of the ways is like, basically taking the Elon Musk approach and basically giving everybody the patents to your products so that the whole space kind of gets elevated by your success.
Mm, to that point, I would say, or I would ask basically you two, would you think this would be something that would make Echelon fail? Or is it rather that it would accelerate or make us win more if we, because I'm fully, don't get me wrong, and I also talked about this in the last panel, that we should be a hub of information and Web3 integration into games, and we should lead by example and share knowledge with others. But now, considering this, the context of the question in particular, it might be arguably not the case that we would fail if we wouldn't concentrate on that. I think we can fail way earlier than after Parallel got a huge success. I think it's an incredible milestone if we can say that Parallel is a successful Web3 integrated game that gains or that is popular in the gaming community, in the broader gaming community. This is what I would call it being a success. And everything after that is, okay, how do we accelerate or expand the success that we have with this product? For me, we assume that we've been successful until that point. For me, it's way more critical to consider what could make us fail up to that point up to that milestone. And I think this could very well happen earlier in the next year or afterwards. We are in a very shaky position, considering crypto and the Web3 space. And something that I felt was a little lacking in the last year, I can say it as I think it is the consideration of how of integrating or considering the community, communicating with the community, and have this lack of sense for how the Web3 space operates and thinks. And I think what we would need to have in the upcoming term would be something of a Web3 navigation. Especially what I want to point to is something like the outside perception of Parallel. Because believe it or not, my perspective of how we have been in the last year was that although we know we have a gem in our hands, although we know Parallel is competent and something that is maybe unique in the whole space, we are in kind of an echo chamber. And the outside perception of Parallel, because I operate mainly outside of Parallel in a lot of other communities in the Web3, and the outside perception of what we have was mediocre at best, I would say. And I don't know, I was wondering why, because if you really get in depth of what we have, you can't other than get hooked, because it's fun and maybe one point is like the complexity of getting into the project. This is maybe one big point, that we are too complex for a lot of people to get easy access. And this is just to answer the question directly. I think this is one of the points that can basically make us fail if we keep up this huge entry walls of complexity to understand how things work with Echelon and Parallel and utility of assets and whatnot, this educational point or the point of high complexity to enter and be part of the community. If we can't manage to ease the entry and to reduce complexity, make it easier for people to understand, to come in and know what asset makes what and what cards do you need for what, and like know the whole working of things, then this could be a potential for failure before even we get to the point of saying Parallel was this huge success. So this is where I would put my focus on considering that question. I don't know what the other people think about this.
I think this is a doomer question. We should be very clear-eyed about exactly the entire arc of the existence of Echelon and what it exists for and where we want to see it go. Sort of in the where we want to see it go, I think if we fail to professionalize and institutionalize, that will be a major failure. We need to have rather robust structures, professional structures that exist around our goals. And one of those goals is decentralization and being the things that Echelon needs to be as a legal entity to survive perhaps the coming storm of regulatory paradigm shifting that's going to happen when actual case law shows up and actual statutes are passed in the very important jurisdictions, which it's hard to deny that the U.S. is probably the single most important jurisdiction for that right now, and we haven't seen it yet. So if we don't institutionalize and professionalize in a way that's going to adhere with that, that's going to be a serious problem. But to go to the sort of the beginning of the arc, we are born from Parallel, and we are born for a very specific reason. Echelon exists as legal entity so that Parallel couldn't issue a token because ICOs are illegal. So this was the legal way to issue a token. And decentralization is an integral component of that. It comes on a spectrum. You can't start decentralized very easily, and not in any time frame that's going to be effective for the kind of things that we want Echelon to do for Parallel. So it started essentially centralized. We had EPs and we had directors, and they did all the things for us that needed to be done. But part of that professionalizing, institutionalizing, needs to address taking very seriously the fact that we're supposed to be a decentralized organization so that we can adhere to legal and regulatory frameworks that are going to come and by all accounts indicate that you need to be as decentralized as possible. Other sort of weakness factors would be financials. Royalties have gone away. That was a main source of income for Echelon. I don't know that we really have any other sources of income going forward. Royalties are basically dead. I don't know anybody that does anything but type 0.5% when they buy and sell stuff on OpenSea. So we're gonna have to figure out how to have reasonable income as we pay 9 EPs $120,000 this year. How many more years can we do that without a reasonable revenue stream? But yeah, what do you guys think about those points?
First of all, shame on you for typing 0.5. That's terrible. Second of all, I agree. Yeah, I was gonna chime in and talk about the regulatory stuff. I think that people who well outside of all the points that you made, which are exactly, I agree with 100% around decentralization and the need for professionalization. Also, two people in the community, I think, have to understand a little bit when they're complaining, like, why didn't you tell us about this, or why can't you do that? If we make one misstep, it very possibly could take the whole thing down. And so I'm not saying that like saying one little thing in Discord or making an announcement, that's going to be the end. But like, the EPs have to be extremely careful, and I'm sure that they're getting legal counsel and whatnot, and so that's why we get the result that we get. And them saying, I'm sure they're not withholding things specifically to, for any reason other than we quite literally cannot say certain things or cannot promise things or cannot do certain things. So, just one consideration to have that, when people are asking questions like, oh, what could be the doom case, or, what could be the downfall of Echelon, like that's in the realm of possibility too, right? You gotta take that into account and understand that the EPs are doing and saying the best that they can without putting us at risk. So, that's been one of kind of the topics of conversation is this, better communication or whatnot. But, that when you're asking for that, also know, also take into consideration the risks that you're introducing by, asking for, whatever you're asking for.
Okay, I'm going to call it there. That's 12 minutes. I just posted in general or the latest Echelon tweet. So that's where you guys can submit. If you click on the type form, you can submit questions there. So anybody in the audience or anybody on stage as well, feel free to put questions in there. We want to make sure we get some good discussions going on in the upcoming panels. I'm going to give you guys a chance to talk maybe for 4 or 5 minutes about Warwick's question here, and then we're gonna call it. So I'm gonna start that timer, and I'll just read it out loud. Is centralization one of those things to keep in mind that could cause Echelon to fail? Go ahead.
I think Boarding touched on it, and decentralization is this sort of like fairy tale idea. I think it exists in some places better than it does others, but I think everything needs to start centralized, right? Like you can't just have a completely decentralized, autonomous organization without having that centralized piece first. And it's important to have that handover to get away. And I think we're getting there. I think we're not completely decentralized, but the question also becomes like, how decentralized do we want to be? And it's much into the question of, will it cause it to fail? I mean, I think every single EP here has defined success in a multitude of ways, right? But I don't think it would lead to failure. I think it's kind of teetering between the two right now. So, I mean, if that was the case, it would have failed already. But it's a spectrum, right? I think Boarding touched on that as well. Right? Like, how far do we want to go? What makes the most sense for the way this is structured and what we want out of Echelon? But I'll give others a chance to answer that one as well.
Yeah. So I would basically agree to what you said, that what if I tell you there's examples out there that failed because of too much decentralization. These examples exist also. And especially in a not so easy position that we are in, we're trying to make something a success that has no prior real success case. Like there's no Web3 integrated game that did what we try to do. And it's very difficult to make everything super decentralized because some decisions or some points need a certain amount of time or someone with an amount of knowledge in that regard to flesh out a concept, to present it, and then to obviously the decision should be decentralized, but we should find a balance. Where the balance is, no one can really tell you, obviously, for now. But what I would add to that point is, rather than obviously too much centralization and entices or motivates manipulation, and also this is not what we want. We want to be somewhere in the middle. But what I would say is way more important is we will have a centralized component, bigger or smaller at any point of time, with Echelon as it is set up, and I think it's a good thing. But we should be way more educative towards the community that votes and make up for the decentralized potion. For example, the votes that happened regarding the token unlock or the token launch. We had like this couple of options, and then we told the people, okay, now decide about these options. But one example where I would say, okay, let's make this mix of centralization and decentralization work better is really try to educate the voter. What is the implication of option 1? What is the implication of option 2? Not only what are we trying to reach, but what prior cases, for example, launched without a DEX or without a centralized exchange, what happened, like make a research, allocate resources to research what the implications are for certain options that the community can vote for, and educate the community to make more informed decisions rather than just throw it at them and tell them now decide for whatever feels the best. And I think if we have this information exchange of people getting paid to research and educate others on what certain decisions imply, which are the EPs, then the community, which make up for the decentralized portion, could make way more informed decisions. And this is like this collaboration or the synergy that I think we should focus on rather than saying we should be only decentralized or only centralized.
Yeah, I really like that idea about having a very concerted effort to educate community members on the things they're going to be voting on. Sort of the thing that came to mind is having like maybe grants for that sort of thing, or people that whose services we retain that are rather professional at producing educational content that is in some ways sort of neutral to the options in the vote, like kind of echelon funded infomercials on the kinds of, not infomercials, but like YouTube videos that have very informative segments on the contents of each part of the vote and contextualizing them in the other options so that people can watch those things and be informed.
Sorry,
like that a
guys,
lot.
we're at time. I know that not everybody got to go, but what I am going to do, because it's everybody here's the last panel, is 60 seconds each, closing statement. Tell us why we should vote for you, and then I'm actually gonna call it here. So 60 seconds each. Whoever would like to go first is welcome to.
Yeah, I'll go first. Jake, go ahead. So you unmute. You're good. All right, I'll go first. Yeah. I think you guys should vote for me because, again, like I said before, this is literally the only thing I think about all day, and not necessarily just like I joke around a lot in a Discord about prices and all that nonsense. That's obviously fun and my own like personal trading stuff, but I spend all day thinking about parallel and things that they could do better and how to implement things. And same thing with Echelon, the kind of the future potential of Echelon as a collective of Web3 games. And I'm absolutely obsessed with figuring out problems and trying to come up with solutions and forecast how decisions are going to affect future decisions and future outcomes. And I think that I'll be your biggest advocate, not only from a community perspective. I know a lot of people are kind of leaning into that in their campaigns, but even things that I think that aren't public issues or popular issues, I've spent a ton of time thinking about and talking to the other EPs and other community members about. And so, I'm really excited to get a chance to run. But I think the rest of the options are incredible as well. So, I'm not I wouldn't be upset either way. I'd love to pitch in, help out, spend time in a professional capacity contributing. But at the end of the day,
sorry, Gamble. I actually let you run over because you didn't get to answer the last question. All good, but great answer.
Yeah.
Let's try to keep it to 60 seconds. Whoever would like to go next, feel free.
Right, I'll go next. That cold plunge buzzer, it's hard. So yeah, I'm just I don't know. I'm super passionate about parallel and echelon. Like I spent a lot of time in my past on my computer gaming, and nothing really quite pulled me into the ecosystem like Parallel and Echelon did, and much to what Campbell already had said for his case was like it's all I think about, how to make it better, what's next, like what's the future of Web3 gaming. um, you know Extremely passionate. And one thing I'd like to add is, I think I have a very good way about me that I can fit into a team and know where to contribute. I'm very much a person who will sit back and listen first, and then try to provide feedback, and not just say something for the point of saying it. I like to actually have um, something meaningful to contribute when in any sort of discussion. I think that's my 60 seconds, quite short.
Beauty. Last two. Whoever jumps in first can go.
I think I can go ahead. Start my time. Yeah, so just in terms of the practical stuff of being an EP, the day-to-day of actually doing the job of collaborating with a group of people from around the world and working on hard problems together in the kind of environment that we have to is just it's what I've been doing for a long time. So in that sense, I'm qualified. I hope if you want to know if you want to vote for me, you'll read the sorts of things I've written and in election discussion and EP candidates about how I feel about things, and sort of in a more idealistic way. This is kind of a culmination of all the things I've done in my life, an opportunity to do something that's never been done before. Decentralizing the ownership layer of a potentially major IP in gaming, and steering that ship with all of the skill sets that I've honed throughout my life is very exciting, and I'll work very, very hard to do it. It's my time.
Nice. All right, Aldezo, close us out here.
All right. Yeah, let me start this way. Don't vote for me if you don't think that I represent your interest. And in that case, I want the best for Echelon and for the APs, and whatever you think or whoever you think represents you the best, you should vote for. For my part, I told you my approach is extremely community focused. I like to give a better picture of Parallel to outsiders, not to the insiders, because we all love Parallel, I think, pretty much equally. And I don't know if I'm the most passionate. Everyone here is passionate about this project, I'm sure about this. But I want to make outsiders see what we have. And I'm someone that I like to challenge people, challenge their ideas. I tend to take out my emotions and my ego, say when something I think is wrong or dangerous, and I like to have this critical voice, and I hope that this could benefit Echelon as an EP.
Amazing. Well, thank you, candidates, for joining us. Thank you to people who hopped in to listen. I will post this in panel recordings probably in about an hour from now. And yeah, look forward to seeing you guys, your names rather, on the snapshot vote that's coming up. So thanks again. Good luck to all of you. And the next panel is tomorrow with Meta Regular. So we'll see you then. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Gold. Thanks, everybody.
You guys around. Thanks, Cold.
Thanks. Thank you. See you later.